Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone on the stream. Just to remind you that if you do want to ask questions, you can leverage Attendee Hub or the app, as well as we'll take questions in the room for those folks that are here today. So welcome. So we're going to continue on our little attack theme for the morning, because who doesn't like to wake up to some descriptions of fun attacks and how to navigate them, right? So please help me welcome Ajay Amlani from iProov, who is going to talk about biometric injection attacks and how to navigate them.
Thank you. Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, I could. Wow, that was loud. Apologize for that. I'm here to tell you about a growing problem. It's actually been growing over 300% year to year. Actually, I think it's actually quarter to quarter now. And we've seen it because iProov is a company that has been working with a lot of nations in terms of being able to set up their digital identity programs and digital health services programs. Singapore, the UK, Australia, now the United States with the Department of Homeland Security work that we've been doing with Customs and Border Patrol, Citizenship and Immigration Services. And what we're finding is, let me make sure I know how to work this, by the way. There's next and there's back. Good. What we're finding is that the bad actors are just getting more and more sophisticated. Surprise, surprise, right? Especially the nation-state actors that are getting more and more sophisticated. And they're acting in a way that basically is investing a significant amount into testing systems, and then immediately once they're able to crack a system, that can now get shared, not just 5 to 10 times, but we're talking about hundreds of thousands of times within the span of minutes. So we're seeing large-scale attacks happening across the globe. This is no surprise to people. What's surprising is that there's a lack of standards and a lack of solutions around actually trying to protect our infrastructure from the growing surge in these attacks. If you think about these attacks, how many people here have used CAPTCHAs before? Okay. How many people here have used photograph CAPTCHAs before? Right, where you actually have to decipher between what's a traffic meter and something else. Well, if you've noticed over time, right, CAPTCHAs were started in 2000, and they were started by Carnegie Mellon. And Carnegie Mellon recognized that basically, hey, guys, we're having trouble detecting what the difference is between a human and a computer. And when you are basically writing code now that can set up literally tens of millions of accounts within the span of minutes, you need to have something that can protect yourself and your system against that. So they came up with this idea, right? It's actually, the T in the CAPTCHA word is actually coming from a Turing test. It's like you're literally testing whether or not it's a consumer, a person, or a machine. And if you've noticed over time, it started as just basically a series of different letters. Then it became slanted letters. Then it became squished and slanted letters. Then it had crazy backgrounds that make it different, almost unrecognizable from a human's perspective to be able to perceive. And then they started realizing, you know what, I think we need a better system. So let me ask you guys a question, like, who here likes CAPTCHAs? Got it. Okay, so that's my point, right? It literally leads to a significant drop-off rate in terms of adoption. And we're talking very high adoption rates, especially now that what you're trying to do is you're trying to set up systems that are challenging enough to be able to keep bad robots out and sophisticated robots out, but easy enough so that regular humans can pass it. Well, what iProov did about 10 years ago is it developed an interesting solution that basically reflects light off of a screen, off of a phone screen, off of a desktop screen, off of your face, and then gets picked up by the camera. 10 years ago, not all desktops had cameras, and obviously smartphones sometimes didn't even have forward-facing cameras at the time. But now in today's day and age, all the modern phones really built within the last about 7 or 8 years have pretty good cameras on it. And what we're finding is that now is a pretty good time to be entering the market for iProov. Now is actually a good time where a lot of nations have been picking up iProov, and we're seeing kind of a tremendous growth rate in our ability to protect. But the reason that we're seeing a high growth rate is not only because of the reason that it's nearly impossible, not impossible, nearly impossible for a computer to be able to trick our systems, but because our acceptance rates are extremely high. We have over 95% acceptance rates in terms of the consumers that basically sign up through the platforms that we're offering for our customers. So now we're getting into consumer mode, right? Like we've been working with a lot of governments. We're now starting to think about, okay, well, how does this actually apply to large consumer-oriented organizations, whether it's financial services companies, whether it's companies like DocuSign, whether it's companies like PayPal, whether it's companies that are really interested in being able to protect against fraud, but make sure that basically the acceptance rates are extremely high. So I'll walk you through a little bit about how we do that, but before I get into it, does anyone have any sort of questions about why would you want this? Okay, so I'll move on. So the company is basically privately owned with 24 granted patents. It's based out of London, although we do have offices in Washington, D.C., Singapore, and now San Francisco, which is my house, by the way. Well-funded, hyperscale business. We've got global market leadership. We're a SaaS-based company, although what we can do is work very closely with FIDO. We do sit on the subgroups through Anthony Lamb, who's here in the audience. And we participate quite a bit with FIDO because what we're finding is that within the FIDO world, which is a phenomenal way to be able to get rid of passwords, the enrollment piece, the credential issuance piece, is still vulnerable. And this is the part that we need to really pay very close attention to, is the credential issuance piece. Not enough attention is being paid to it. There's not enough standards work being done to it, and that's why we're participating heavily with FIDO, and we'll continue to participate even more as this becomes a very important component of FIDO's work going forward. We've got some proven market leadership. You can see a quick list of our customers here between, obviously, you see Department of Homeland Security. I worked in the first year of the Department of Homeland Security. Afterwards, I helped to start Clear, the airport security fast line. And over the years, identity has just become more and more difficult from a digital world. I started participating in FIDO in the early days with Ramesh Kasanupalli and others. And now what we're seeing is the challenge is on the enrollment side, is something that we need to kind of start to pivot towards, is how do we protect that more effectively? What we're also finding is that consumer preferences are shifting towards biometric face verification. And while there's still challenges in Washington, D.C., and I'm literally going out today talking to a lot of Hill staffers about this, on inclusion and other topics like that around biometric face verification, we're finding that consumers actually love it. They're getting so used to it with their Apple devices, with their Google devices, with Microsoft and other tools that are basically offering this for real-time, easy enrollment, that it's becoming second nature to them to just basically Face ID. And so what we're finding is 40% of global consumers have said that they're fine with online face verification if they trust the organization. 38% of global consumers have used online face verification at least once, and 22% of global consumers use face verification to access their mobile devices, and 55% use biometrics. So we're seeing pretty high growth rates in terms of the use of biometrics. But how do you verify that the person is not just who they say they are, but they're actually there at that time? Because now sophisticated bad actors have started to catch on to this trend. And they've started to see this. And they've started to develop literally software that you can now download for free off the web that can morph faces. Imagine like 5 faces that can be morphed into one that can pass for all 5 people. So we're seeing this in different places, like where we run National Health Service enrollment, where you can now enroll 5 people into one profile that can now access healthcare services. So what we're doing is keeping a very careful balance between protection and convenience. And it's all built on the underlying balance of the customer experience. And this threat landscape, is evolving pretty quickly. At first, it really started with impersonation, right? Just taking somebody else's ID. Obviously, that ID doesn't really look like that person. And so there were tools built and put into place to be able to verify, oh yeah, you know what, we need to actually lift that picture off of that card and match it against that person's face remotely when doing a remote enrollment. Great. But then it opened up another area of vulnerability, which is presentation. So then there was a lot of research done on presentation attacks. And how do we actually defend against presentation attacks? That created this field called liveness. How do we make sure that the person on the other end is actually a live human being? Not a photo, right? Not a mask or other things. Well, this next piece that we're seeing now is called digital injection. And it is actually where, if you're familiar with hacking systems, it's actually very easy to hack a camera. And it's very easy to inject not just a photo into the camera, but actually a deep fake into the camera. And through emulators now today that are openly available that you can load, you can now be able to create these types of systems where you can morph faces, you can inject attacks, you can replay videos that were done off of prior sessions. You can hack somebody else's device and replay that for authentication. So biometrics is becoming something that a lot of attackers now are starting to go after, and they understand the value of it. So that's where what our solution is doing is trying to protect against that. We've seen a huge increase in these types of attacks. And really, it starts with basically, I'm sorry for the dilution of the slide, by the way. Our security guys said that I can't use all the data because obviously these are like under protected realms of national governments right now. But for the most part, what you see is like a map, and the map gets bigger, and then that's where it's at now. This is all I got approved. Okay? What was in the original slide is actually the evolution of how quickly these digital injection attacks are being conducted, how quickly people are finding vulnerabilities within systems, and how within the span of minutes it's now becoming a global problem that's being shared to a very, very large scale, to a surprisingly scary scale. And the original image manipulation attack through our Security Operations Center, which we not only employ a bunch of face reflection identity geeks that are all PhDs that sit in our back office in London, but also a bunch of geeks that are actually looking for these attacks nonstop, 24/7, so that if these actually do happen, which again, it's nearly impossible, but it's not impossible, and people will find these vulnerabilities. Our folks are constantly watching it to make sure that it's no longer going to be able to be scalable. And so now we can flip the script a little bit. We've been thinking about bad actors now and how to protect our systems against bad actors. Well, let's think about customers first, right? And so what we've been doing is protecting against impersonation attacks, right? You could basically face match. You can then evolve into the presentation attack and determine whether or not that's a real person. Is that person live? And there's multiple sophisticated providers out there today that have really great liveness tools that can help to solve that kind of a problem. What iProov does is it goes after the digital injection attacks as well. And this is the piece basically that is a very difficult challenge that a lot of people are seeing right now. And how do we do that? Well, we do that through a tool called Genuine Presence Assurance. We have a flash mark technology, and what it does is it basically allows you to verify that that person is real, is right there, and is authenticating right now. And we also have a tool called Liveness Assurance, which is a bit more simple. It still allows you to be able to create a liveness capability. But on the spectrum of liveness now, you can now verify people are live after they've done the enrollment. The enrollment piece of it is, I think, what a lot of people are not spending a lot of time on. And that's where we have basically 8 different colors that are chosen at random, that are reflected off of your face, and that are now bounced back into the camera. And that's what's led to the very high acceptance rates that we're able to get. Obviously, from a security and reassurance perspective, we have the continuous biometric security piece of it, an assured platform for security to be cyber resilient. Optimum biometric performance is something that we're constantly doing in terms of testing different types of biometric algorithms, depending upon the need, depending upon the necessity. And then we have the proactive monitoring piece of it as well. So what we do is we build online trust, right? And it's all about usability and inclusivity. It's all about maximizing the number of good people that you can actually have get through the system. And it's about providing that strong security and proven experience. And at the end of the day, it's really about verifying that it's the right person, it's a real person, and it's right now. So thank you so much. Obviously, we're huge advocates of FIDO. We're working with a lot of our customers worldwide to be able to extend beyond the enrollment solution where they're using our solutions, and then also leveraging FIDO to be able to conduct the rest of the authentications going forward. But if you have any questions, we do have a booth, and then also I'd love to open it up for questions right now.
Any questions in the room? Sorry, I have a light right in my eye. I have a question. So one of the things that we talk about in terms of deep fakes and attacks against local biometrics is the lack of scalability for some of these kinds of attacks. But you're talking about scalable attacks. So I just wondered if maybe you could kind of step us through how an attack like that would work.
Sure.
In like a scalable way.
Yeah. So the scalability of biometric attacks is something that's the concern has been minimized over time. And I'll tell you why. When we first started the Department of Homeland Security, rolled out physical biometric systems in locations, you were dealing with one person at that point in time who is possibly using a deep fake or possibly using a mask, possibly using something else to try to trick a system. Well, obviously you're concerned about that one person. That one person can create a lot of damage. So liveness tools were created off of biometric systems back since 2000, earlier than even 2000. And this was to verify that it's a human. Like literally, like fingerprint systems would be developed so that it can measure blood flow going through the fingers. Face was done around lighting. Iris was created to be able to actually test the liveness of a iris image. We deployed all of those with Clear early. Now when you're going to a digital system, and a remote system at that, you have a significant concern that basically the person on the other end is in fact not who they say they are. And they're using an image or a deep fake or something else like that to be able to trick the system. And that is a huge concern, but to your point, and that's a great question, the scalability of it is still limited, right? Because you're using a physical mask, a physical photo, something up against a physical camera. Well, guess what? The camera can be, there's a lot of attachments to a computer today because the camera is not necessarily one of those protected enclaves within a phone. It was never created to do this. It was created to take great photos, but it was never created to be able to be and withstand an attack, right? That's not what the camera's for. The camera's to take great photos and be able to do video chats, right? It's not meant for biometric applications. And so now, you have to now move into this world where the camera is now not a protected piece of the device, and you have to assume that if it's not a protected piece of the device, that it is a compromised device. And so when it's a compromised device now, it could be a compromised device at scale. There could be hundreds of thousands of compromised devices out there in the market. And by being able to trick that compromised device, it doesn't even have to operate across hundreds of thousands of compromised devices. You could just have one device. And you could run multiple devices, you could run multiple application sessions through that one device. So once you figure out that vulnerability, once you figure out how to actually attack that, what's the right way to be able to get through it, now you have networks globally that are operating real time, being able to share these in a moment's notice. I'll give you an interesting example of a prior identity tech company I had, which did digital coupons, of all things. It's an identity wallet. I set out to make the world a better place. I ended up basically just targeting advertisements better, which is kind of what a lot of people in Silicon Valley end up doing. And guess what? Well, hackers were attacking our systems. But the hackers were attacking the coupon network. And why were they attacking coupons? Why do they care? Well, turns out you can actually create a $5 off coupon on a $2 item. What? Yes, you can. You can actually create a fictitious coupon that is, when you